The word Kritya means Shabda Shakti or the power of words. Ever since I learned the power of imagination, the word Kritya has been a dormant yet haunting seed of thought waiting to be awakened by my dreams. Dreams, like words, have been my constant companion. They have never betrayed or deserted me. My fists were never empty, as there were usually a few dreams stuck to my wet palms. These were always fascinatingly colored and spoke to me a language I clearly understood. Thus, words became an important part of my dream. I do not know how and when exactly words started hypnotize me. Perhaps it was when I learned the art of joining the letters of alphabet and reading them as words and sentences. They came to me with a host of meanings. Reading soon became my life. While reading Vedas, I discovered the word Kritya was negative word power. Most of the explanation described Kritya as a spell. In mythology also, it has a very negative meaning. It was very close to demon or Rakshasi. However, the Buddhism directed the meaning of Kritya was little different. My love for words never accepted it. I could not imagine that word can be have a negative power. And I thought that the words always have positive power, only a man use them in a negative way. That's why when I thought of a journal, I choose the word Kritya for a title. And soon Kritya became as popular as the word itself. Kritya is not a journal only, it is a dream, it is a mission toward the literature. In modern days, when everything is so difficult, life is changing or life is taking a special turn or U-turn toward our ancient time, the word can still save us, and that is the aim of Kritya. कृत्या की मुख्य पत्रिका कविता पर आधारित है, लेकिन कृत्या का उद्देश्य केवल कविता को रेखांकित करना मात्र नहीं है। कृत्या चाहती है कि शब्द शक्ति किसी भी तरह से रेखांकित की जाए। इसके अंतर्गत साहित्य के सभी विभाग आते हैं और यही नहीं, हम ये भी चाहते हैं कि साहित्य और अन्य कलाओं के बीच में समन्वय स्थापित किया जाए। प्राचीन कविता को, प्राचीन साहित्य को वर्तमान साहित्य और संस्कृति से जोड़ा जाए। कुछ आदान प्रदान अनेक भाषाओं के बीच भी हो, क्योंकि हर भाषा अपनी एक संस्कृति को रेखांकित करती है, कहती है और हमें कुछ न कुछ सीखने को देती है। यही कारण है कि हम आवर मास्टर्स, हमारे अग्रज, उनसे लेकर नए नए लेखकों, कवियों, कलाकारों के साथ में समन्वय स्थापित करने की कोशिश करते हैं। कविता को चित्रकला से जोड़ते हैं और गद्य को पद्य से जोड़ते हैं। कृत्या कोई ऐसी संस्था नहीं है जिसका उद्देश्य किसी तरह का लाभ कमाना हो या अपने आप को स्थापित करना हो। कृत्या केवल वर्तमान साहित्य परिवेश में, परिदृश्य में कुछ करना चाहती है, कुछ ऐसा जो आगे चलकर युवाओं की शक्ति बने। यह एक यात्रा है, यह एक कशिश है, यह एक तप है जो हम सब से मिलकर ही पूरा होगा। यदि हम सब मिलेंगे, सब जुड़ेंगे, साहित्यकार, कवि, लेखक, संगीतकार, गायक, फिल्मकार और सब एक साथ एक ही रास्ते में चलेंगे तो शायद कृत्या की जो शब्द शक्ति है वह पुनः स्थापित होगी।
Forms like drama, dance, song and painting. Today we are celebrating it again in the form of his art, acting, singing, dancing and painting. This is how we will be able to relish poetry. Today Sri Ramaram Nayan is with us with his group Sopanam. I am grateful to him and welcome him on the behalf of all poetry lovers. I need not say anything about Ramaram, as we all know his greatness, but it is true. When my North Indian writer friends come to know that Kavalamji has given performance at my concert, I am sure they will be envious of me. Dr. Panikkar is more famous outside of Kerala. I assume because most of the letters written to the editor appreciated his poetry, as you will see that Panikkar's poetry was taken as editor's choice. In first issue, sir, I welcome you, sir, on behalf of Poetry
edited and produced by Dr. Kritya-Poetry.
कृत्या वेब पत्रिका ही नहीं है, केवल एक वेब पत्रिका मात्र नहीं है, यह एक संगठन है, एक आंदोलन है और एक विश्वास है कि हम भारतीय भाषाओं के साहित्य को विश्व के रंगमंच पर ले जाएं। जब कृत्या का बीज मेरे दिमाग में आया था, उसी समय मैंने सोचा था कि कृत्या केवल हिंदी की नहीं रहेगी, केवल अंग्रेजी की नहीं रहेगी, ये भारतीय भाषाओं की रहेगी। और इसके लिए किसी कारण से मैंने आरंभ करने से पहले ही यहाँ पर अमित शेखर जी को फोन करके पूछा कि मैं ऐसा कार्य करने जा रही हूँ।
ला बच्चा, आज पूजा किस धरती पर, इस धरती की बार बार नमस्कार है।
Welcome to you all in the name of Kritya. This is indeed a joyous and proud moment for Kritya when all of you have come to celebrate Kritya 2007 International Poetry Festival with us today. Let me start by welcoming our guest, Chief Guest, His Excellency Shri R.L. Bhatia, the Governor of Kerala. Your Excellency, it is indeed your great honor for Kritya that you have graced this occasion. Sir, I warmly welcome you to this memorable occasion in the name of Kritya and in my own name. Thank you, sir. Her Royal Highness Princess Ashwati Tirunal Gauri Lakshmibai, herself a poet, has always been a patron of arts, and now she is partaking in our joy. In the name of Kritya and in my own name, I extend to you, Royal Highness, a very warm welcome. Kritya is daughter of East and West. She has entered the Western Circle confidently with the kind help and patronage of number of well-wishers. We have with us today the Western representative of Kritya, Mr. R. Spire.
At the start of the preparations for the Poetry Festival, Dr. Saxena told me that she is working with the assumption that poetry is a state of mind. I wondered about that. I wondered whether that was a solid enough point of view to depart from. Is this all poetry is about? A state of mind? But when we discussed it on the internet, Dr. Saxena gave a fuller description and a fuller definition that gave us more scope. She referred to a quote from Rollo May, and I read the quote to you. It is about spontaneity and limitations. Creativity arises out of the tension between spontaneity and limitations. The latter, like the riverbanks, forcing spontaneity into the various forms which are essential for art and poetry. If we look closer to this quote, we see that there is enough space in it and in this assumption to form a work thesis for a poetry festival. The metaphor describes a river and its banks. The banks hold the river and steers it to the sea. But there is more. There are dynamic processes that affect both the river and the banks. In stormy weather, in full monsoon, when masses of water fall from the sky and fill the river, it is the river that shapes the banks to fit its flow.
I do not think there is much scope for a grandly qualified presidential address. Madam had told me to present one of my poems to you. She has confirmed it and said there is no need to go for a long-winded speech or anything. So I think I will listen to what she says, and I will just read out a poem I had written. It is somewhat apt in today's circumstances, for me at least. This poem was written on the 2nd anniversary of Maharaja Chitira Tirunal Ramavarma, whose sister's daughter I am blessed to be. In my tears, in haunting silence, part of my heart, a secret part, does ever weep. In silent homage, in gratitude, in parting pain and trauma of love, cocooned by fine woven mesh of myriad memories on the march, my heart stands still in frozen shock to notes of last post-fate trumpets. Its duty well done, life opts out with lingering farewell, loath to part. Its seat of play, now in open display, a slumbering statue of serene mien. The blushing flames did bold proclaim life on gross self has renounced claim. To dismal death, nay, but to life after life. To dismal death, nay, but to life after life.
Now the moment we've been waiting for, I request His Excellency Shri R.L. Bhatia, Governor of Kerala, to say a few words.
Your Royal Highness, Dr. Rati Saxena, Mr. Argos Pierce, Mr. Muhammad Kunju, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here to inaugurate the International Poetry Festival. Let me on the onset greet the eminent writers and delegates who have come from far Kerala, Lord's own country. I would also like to compliment Kritya on its initiative to host this festival. Professor Panika was much reverse man of the letter and a multifaceted personality.
Poetry is not an opium for the masses, but it can be food for the soul. Oscar Wilde, the great Irish writer at the end of the 19th century, published a book called Socialism and the Soul of Man, in which he said that in order for a soul to be a developed and healthy soul, a man must live in a society which is guided by the humanist principles of socialism and which at the same time appreciates the beauty which is singular to great art. All of the developed, advanced and evolved societies of the world, those guided by social democratic principles, see the necessity of providing money to the community of poets and the making of poetry. They see it as important as providing money for education and for health care. The political elite that would deny financial assistance to poetry is the same political elite that would deny financial assistance to medical care and to education. And it is with great pleasure It is with great pleasure that the Irish poets learned we were coming to Kerala, a country that not only has a very venerable, established, antique tradition of poetry, but has a government enlightened enough to provide financial support to an international poetry festival.
I am the last to go. 5 hours of white heat is the time it takes to blast me to cinders, to place in the urn on your mantelpiece. Shaman broods over me, stares for future sight. I'm your source of music, the instrument that pleases, your everyday tool, and your sacred weapon.
நடுநிலை பாட்டரன் உண்டே செய்யகத்தியா நடுநிலை நாட்டரன் உண்டே செய்யகத்தியா நடுநிலை பாட்டரன் உண்டே செய்யகத்தியா நடுநிலை யாரோ செய்யகத்தியா அதையும் செய்யகத்தியாரோ செய்யகத்தியா அதையும் செய்யகத்தியாரோ செய்யகத்தியா அதையும் செய்யகத்தியாரோ செய்யகத்தியா பந்தரிகள் பார்ப்பனம் செய்யகத்தியாரோ செய்யகத்தியா அதையும் செய்யகத்தியாரோ செய்யகத்தியா பந்தரிகள் பார்ப்பனம் தண்ணி செய்யகத்தியா பாடிப்பனம் துயிலுணரானாய் செய்யகத்தியா சாதியும் செய்யகத்தியாரோ செய்யகத்தியா தம்புரானும் துயிலுணர்நல்லோ செய்யகத்தியா தம்புராட்டின் துயிலுணர்நல்லோ.
कविता लोहा नहीं, कविता लोहा नहीं, काट लेती है लोहा। लोहे में कविता नहीं, पर कविता की धार तो है। इस्पात नगर से जुड़े मन नीड़ बुनते हैं कविता से। यहाँ दरख्त हैं, पंछी हैं, फड़फड़ाहट के साथ, कलरव के साथ, बादल हैं, अमराइयाँ हैं, पड़ोसी हैं, गुपचुप बातें हैं। फिर भी कभी कभी चिड़िया बिजली के खम्भे पर बिजली के खम्भे पर बसेरा बनाती है, शाखाओं के आमंत्रण को नकार के। छाया की शीतलता को पुकार जलते सूरज को ललकारती है। लोहे के साथ कविता है, कोई बात तो होगी। So when it is festival, there will be reports, there will be advertisement, and people will come. So like it happened in Chandigarh.
साइयां दे दर तो My first contention is that the arts speak a universal language. They have never accepted in the world the geographical boundaries or the historical boundaries or the linguistic boundaries. They have always crossed limitations and spoken in the universal language of mankind.
Welcome to Kritya 2010 in collaboration with CIIL. We have with us a number of poets of international stature and repute, amongst also other Indian poets. I am Shyamla Nair, part of Kritya organizers of the festival. This is our 5th International Poetry Festival, and we have with us Alicia Partnoy from Argentina. We have with us here the director of Kritya 2010, Dr. Rati Saxena, who will tell us more about the festival.
Thank you, Shyamla. As you know that Kritya is an organization which is working in field of art, culture, literature, poetry, and cinema also, and through translation we reach to every part of the world. And this is our 5th year for International Poetry Festivals. We have a journal which comes out every month. This is a web journal, and this is www.kritya.in, in which we present all sort of poetry and art and culture in this our site. This festival is a dream of Kritya. This is a platform where we bring all the poets and artists from all over the world in one stage, so that we can communicate with each other, we can learn from each other, and we can present ourselves and we can improve ourselves. So this is the 5th poetry festival. First was in Kerala, second was in Jammu and Kashmir, third was again in Kerala, and fourth was in Punjab, and this is the 5th one. We are very happy that we are in Mysore, such a beautiful city, and CIL is collaborating us, giving full support. We are grateful to them, and that's how we run our festivals. This time we have 22 poets from all over world, all around the world, and our theme is the exile, trauma, and survival. And we are grateful to Alicia, who has come, who is Argentina, and she is a great poet and writer. From the, especially she fits to our theme, exile, trauma, and survival.
We are lucky to have with us Miss Alicia Partnoy from Argentina. She is a survivor from the secret detention camps where about 30,000 people disappeared in her country, Argentina. She is best known as the author of The Little School, Tales of Disappearance and Survival, that was published in Argentina in 2006. Her other testimonials include Little Low Flying and The Revenge of the Apple. Her poems, testimonial texts, and scholarships have been widely published in the USA and abroad. Alicia Partnoy served on the boards of directors of PEN, Roadway, and Amnesty International USA. She is an associate professor at Loyola Marymount University. Partnoy presides over Proyecto VOS, that is Voices of Survivors, an organization that brings survivors of state-sponsored violence to lecture at US universities. Welcome, Alicia. Alicia, you've gone through so much in life. You've survived the little school. You've been tormented, tortured, molested. You've been blindfolded. Your baby has been taken away from you. How did you go through it? And why did you choose poetry as a vehicle of your predicament?
I went through it because I didn't have any other choice then. There was a military dictatorship in my country, and my baby was little, and I had to take a stand. I couldn't allow for my child to be raised under an oppressive regime. So I risked my life, but so were thousands. That's why we have 30,000 disappeared people in my country. A lot of people resisted the dictatorship. Poetry chose me, right?
Okay,
That's what
okay,
happens to us.
okay.
Poetry chooses
didn't
us.
choose
We
poetry.
don't
You didn't
choose
choose
it. As a child, I was writing poetry. In jail, I was in the concentration camp. I was reciting poetry to my fellow inmates there. We were blindfolded with our hands tied, forced to remain on a mattress. We couldn't speak, but then when we could talk, I would recite a poem sometimes to just to try to give us courage, right? To remind ourselves that we were human, despite of what they tried to do to us.
Yeah.
So when I went to jail, they transferred. I'm very lucky. I'm one of very few survivors, and because of international pressure, because of the work of people telling on this. So when I was survived the detention, the secret detention camp, and was transferred to the prison for women political prisoners in Buenos Aires, I started to recite poetry there for my friends, right?
Okay.
And that's when I became a performer of my poetry.
Okay.
And that's when I used poetry when, as a present. We didn't have many things, so I would write a poem for someone for her birthday. We wrote poems for our children, so we would send to our children. And poetry was a help to survive. It was like a balsam, something soothing, comforting. In the jail, when I started to recite my poetry, I said I had my very first captive audience, because my friends couldn't go to any other program.
Captive audience
Captive
in quotes.
audience in
Quotes.
quotations, between
In
quotations. You have to laugh a little bit, right? One of the poems I wrote to my daughter when I was there, the poems used to come back. You couldn't send poetry out. Sometimes you were lucky and they allowed it to go out. But this poem never left the prison. It came back to me with a big stamp that says censored. Marxist contents. Okay, you're going to hear what this poem is called Lullaby Without the Onion. And I'll do it in English, I'll read it in English, and I'll sing it in
That would be
Spanish.
nice.
I'm not a good singer, but since
That's okay.
it's Spanish, and it's a lullaby. And the onion references to Miguel Hernandez, a poet of the Civil War, whose wife was, while he was in jail, whose wife was suffering a lot of hunger, and she only had onions and bread. And so the baby, she was breastfeeding this baby that was eating onions with the milk. So he had that, and it's a very important poet for us. So that's why Lullaby Without the Onion. Your mother isn't in prison. Your mother has birds in the blood. Grates and bars don't detain her, nor padlocks, nor is she in prison, nor has she left you. Her sadness is dove, her pain is swallow, her days are sparrows seeking your street corners. Your mother isn't in prison, girl. Your mother throws the birds or her blood into flight. If they get to your soul and make nests, you can shout to them, it has dawned. Villa Devoto Prison, 1978. Nana sin la cebolla. Tu madre no está presa, tu madre tiene pájaros en la sangre, no la detienen. Las rejas, los barrotes, ni los candados ni tu madre está presa, ni te ha dejado. Su tristeza es paloma, su dolor golondrina, sus días son gorriones buscando tus esquinas. Tu madre no está presa, niña, tu madre. Echa a volar los pájaros de su sangre. Si llegan hasta tu alma y allí hacen nido, que tú puedas gritarles que ha amanecido, que tú puedas gritarles que ha amanecido.
That was wonderful, Alicia. The best poetry, I believe, comes from acute pain, and I believe this is something you've covered up pain with so very.
Poetry itself doesn't change the world. Poetry makes for us easier to change the world, and I don't think I'm the first one in saying that. It's been said, right? It makes us, it makes it easier for us. Beyond, I do write other poems. I have erotic poetry and stuff
Nice.
but it might not be so necessary like other people are writing. I tried to write poetry. It's more philosophical now because I'm wiser. I've studied a lot. I read other poets. Here at Kritya, I'm going from Kritya with a lot of this energy, with the languages of all these people, these new people I've met, my new friends, with all these sounds, with other experiences. And I see myself as a bridge. I mean, Kritya is a humongous bridge that crosses the world, right? And so I am a little bridge too. And so when there are realities that need to be addressed, I want to do them. I want to address them with the best poetry I can produce. I have this poem, Arte Política, that is, you know how people have their Ars Poetica. Ars Poetics, this is Ars Politica. Arte Política. Un verso desnudo de todo malabar y adorno, para que nadie diga que después de Auschwitz, que después de la conquista, que después de tantas diminutas esmas, de tantas pequeñitas sabras y chatilas, de Ruanda, de Kosovo, de todas las falullas bombardeadas, para que nadie diga que nada que decir nos queda, que nada ya nos parte en seco el cerebro, la lengua y alguna que otra víscera que se da el lujo de palpitar los duelos.
Alicia, I am thankful to you that you came to India and you took part in a Kritya festival. We are really grateful to you. You have done wonderful work and we are learning from you and from your poetry. So painful. Do you think that we can do more in your country along with Kritya? Not only in your country, the other places of the world. Can we do something? Can we bring back poetry in the mainstream? Because you know that poetry is not in a mainstream now these days. You are a wonderful woman that you have won the poetry. You have won your pains and sorrows through poetry. So we want to learn from you. What can we do to bring the poetry in mainstream and do something which we could, and what can we give to our next generation?
Rati, I think we are doing what we can. I don't think, and you are doing amazing work here at Kritya in India. I think we shouldn't worry about my mainstream. You seem to be worried about mainstream. Now we have access to media that is more democratic. Mainstream cares a lot for a certain message. They might not want to listen to our message. They might not be interested in our poetry But the people are, so we have ways of reaching them that are multiplying these days. And as we build more and more bridges and we bring more poets of the quality of the poets I met here, this labor is gonna give great fruit. I think that we can poets speak to the people when we listen to the people. And now we gather, we share, and now we're gonna go away with a lot to do in the world. Not just poetry, but a lot to do along with our poetry.
We have a number of poets from different part of world, and right now I am having Peter Wa from Austria, Odwe Klebe from Norway, and Hanane Ath from Lebanon, Zingone from Italy, and Osvaldo Soma from Costa Rica. In this festival, our theme was Exile, Trauma and Survival. It is a very relevant and very beautiful theme. It covers everything, the exile as a war exile or as a exile chosen as a job or dependent on our economic problem, or sometimes exile, emotional or spiritual exile. We had a very good sessions, and now I want to talk to my poets friends and want to know what they are gaining from this festival and from India, what they are learning from us and what we are learning, because we learn a lot from them. They are very good poets. We learn a lot of good poetry from them. But I want to know that what they are taking back from India, from Mysore and from Kritya. Not only that, I want to know that what can be done for poetry, because poetry is at the back seat. It is not an important function or important thing in the art circle. So can we do for poetry? Because as what we have done, that poetry and painting and film, everything we included, can we do something where the poetry stand with the respect, with love, with the self-respect, I must say. So I just want to talk my friends. Peter, what do you think of it?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things about Kritya, especially the festival, I mean, you do lots of other things as well, such as the website, the online magazine, but about the festival is the diversity. So, and of course, when you come to India, that's one of the most fascinating things about India is for us from Europe, that it's so big and there's so many different geographical regions and languages, and of course for us it's a completely different culture. It's very different, and we have to get used to it, of course. But it's also fascinating, and I think we really enjoyed coming here, and myself also coming to other festivals. This is the third time I've been to a Kritya festival, for which I'm very grateful. And it's interesting to meet all the other poets, to meet so many different poets from other nations, and especially so many different people from India. And I think it's special about the festival that you have these international poets in different languages from South America, Europe, but also a lot of different languages from India, from within India. You always invite a lot of poets from all over India, and also I find very good that you involve local languages, local poets, either as part of the main program or just having a separate program just for the local language. I find that extremely good. Also, I think an important aspect of the festival is having an open mic, which I think we've had for the past 2 festivals. And that's very good to give people outside of the main program who write poetry themselves a chance to just present 1 poem or 2 poems themselves in their language, perhaps with translation, perhaps not. I think it's also good that you have translations into Hindi and sometimes into the other languages, the local language, as into Punjab when it was in...
there was Punjabi poetry.
Yeah, where were we? In Chandigarh. And the other thing that I think is very good is involving other arts as part of the festival. So in Trivandrum there was painting being done live on stage to the poems of Panika. And this year and last year as well, there were also painters involved as part of the program, and this year even more so than before. People were actually doing paintings throughout the festival, which was shown at the end and influenced by the poetry. So it's a real interaction between poetry and painting. And then, of course, and this last year at Chandigarh and this year too, there's also been the involvement of film as well.
Yeah.
So this year we saw lots of short films about poetry, including those of Vic Cleaver, and who was also making films about the festival, about the poets. So I think it's good how all these different fields are involved, and how this is growing and becoming more and more all the time, and I hope it will continue like that. So, Audrey, perhaps you can tell us more about the films.
Yes. Yes, this is my second time in India. My first time was at Kritya 2008 in Chandigarh, and I'm very grateful to meet India this way through poetry. I think that's a good way to know the people and the different languages and listen to the poetry. And I think poetry is very important, and you can create poetry through different expressions. Poetry is about finding the silence, the reflection, the music, and you can do it through words and you can do it through images. And when I was in Chandigarh, I also, together with my poems, I brought a film with a poem by a Palestinian writer. And I also brought a photographer and a camera. And we made a lot of recordings at the festivals and also before and after. And I got so fascinated by just looking at the faces of the different poets coming from all over the world and all over India, and listening to their different languages. So we have made, or are still making, short films with just the poets and their poems, and also short films with other images where we use the poetry as a voiceover. So for me, Kritya has been a way to getting to know India, and also a way to getting to know the rest of the world through the poets coming to Kritya.
What will you do after going to your own country when you go back to Norway? Are you going to do something, or are you trying to do same thing what Kritya is doing in India?
Yes, I would like to do that. I would like to create some of the. I will bring the atmosphere of Kritya with me, and I will tell the people and the other poets in Norway about this experience. And of course, it would be great also to bring poets to Norway in the atmosphere of Kritya. So we'll see.
Thank you.
And Hananad, what do you say about your experience?
I would like to repeat again that it was really for me a very strong symbol of dialogue between cultures and between humans. And we could see this very well during our sessions and our readings. We could listen to the other poets coming from different countries, and we could touch by a way the suffering of everyone, their aspirations, their worries, and it was for me a very, very rich experience. And really, we can thank Kritya-Poetry Festival for giving us this opportunity to communicate, one between us as poets from different countries, and two, to communicate with the Indian audience. And it was really wonderful to see almost of the time a big audience listening seriously to poetry and believing in poetry. And for me, it meant a lot. It meant that poetry doesn't die, as a lot of intellectual and even some poets try to say that poetry is dying because we have now the big place for the novel and for the other forms of literature. Kritya Poetry Festival, with the other festivals which are similar and serious as Kritya, can prove that poetry doesn't die, poetry will survive, and poetry can be really this bridge between us, between all of us in the front. It can stop wars, it can stop all kinds of conflicts, because it's a kind of listening to the other. And when we will listen to the other, we will be friends with him.
Good, very good. Syngonia.
Okay, well, this is my first time that I participate in a festival in India. I have participated in festivals in Latin America and in Italy, and it was extremely, extremely interesting for me to listen to different poets from India expressing themselves in their languages, because I had never had that experience before, and I had never had the opportunity really of studying the Indian poetry, and I identified myself very much with the women poets, with the Indian women poets. I think that Kritya has done a very good job, not only in bringing together poets, I think, of very high level, but also with the subject that was chosen this year, seeing different points of view from different people that have been in exile for one reason or another, voluntary or involuntary exile, and stories of survival, from so many different points of views, different cultural expressions, has really given me, has opened my heart to the suffering of other people. And it has done it through poetry. And I think that this is something that I will take back to my country and we'll talk about. So thank you, Kritya. I found this a very, very interesting festival.
Last May I was in Italy and find that there was shortage of audience in poetry reading sessions, and they have wonderful poetry festivals. They have very good culture associations, but there are hardly any audience. And do you think that can you do something in Italy for poetry and learn from Kritya and doing something similar line there?
Well, I say that we can put all our efforts into doing this. I think, I don't know what the experience of our friend poets, European friend poets is, but I think that in Italy, poetry is going through, I don't want to call it a crisis, but a lot of people prefer to go to the beach or see a football match or do anything else but poetry. But I think, like Hanan was saying before, poetry does have a very important role.
Yes.
And people, when they are in front of poetry, they see themselves in a mirror and they cannot be indifferent.
Yeah.
Especially if it's real, true, good poetry. So, of course, we have to make an effort to involve more people in poetry, in Europe in general, not just in Italy. Now I think it's Osvaldo Sama from Costa Rica, his turn. Osvaldo will be speaking in Spanish and I will translate.
Yo he estado en otros festivales en otras partes de Latinoamérica y también Italia. Y cada uno de esos festivales tiene una particularidad.
I have been to various festivals in Latin America and also in Italy, and each one of these festivals has its particularity.
Pero para mí Kritya tiene por varias razones, un sentido muy particular para mí en esta primera ocasión que vengo. La primera es porque es en un país mítico, ancestral para toda la humanidad, como es la India.
But Krisha, for me, has a very particular significance. In the first place, because India represents a myth and it is ancestral to all of our cultures.
Eso particularmente y porque le permite a uno ver por los propios ojos esa realidad tan lejana de mi país.
And because it has allowed me to see through my own eyes that particularity of India.
La segunda que me gusta mucho es porque hemos convivido en una casa como si esto fuera un reality show donde no hay expulsados ni hay competencia, sino que hemos logrado lo que se pretende lograr en esos reality shows: una gran amistad, una camaradería, un entendimiento, una gran amistad que va más allá de las palabras.
And the second thing is that we have all lived together under one roof, in one house, like a big reality show, but with nobody being expelled and nobody being brought in, with no competition, and we have achieved what the reality show should achieve, which is one community and with friendship.
Sí, me resulta como la Torre de Babel, donde hay muchas lenguas, pero en este caso todos nos entendemos porque estamos enlazados con la poesía.
It's like the Babel Tower, where there are many different languages, but we are all together and all one through poetry.
Particularmente podría decir eso y le agradezco realmente haber estado aquí porque me he sentido muy bien, me he sentido en casa, me he sentido con amigos y eso es lo fundamental para mí.
So I really thank this opportunity I had because I really felt at home and among friends.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
राजन रावल